What's up guys, it's me, Jeremy. The patch 6.4 notes are out, and with every patch bringing us a wonderful array of buffs and nerfs, there's also a bunch of indirect or hidden buffs and nerfs that take place. As well, here are some of my favorite comments where I asked what you guys thought about Aurelian Soul. For a chance to be featured in a future video, leave a comment about what your favorite change in patch 6.4 is. As well, I've teamed up with ProGuides.com for the editing on this video. If you're interested in more traditional guides, they have a free trial that gets you full access, so you can check them out and decide for yourself if you like it or not. Anyways, let's get started. The first hidden buff for patch 6.4 is to melee brawlers and duelists, particularly those in the top lane, with the exception of the ones directly nerfed on this patch, so champions like Aurelia, Aatrox, Jax, Tryndamere, etc. This happens for two reasons. First off, the change to the Warlord's Bloodlust Mastery really benefits those kinds of all-in fighters and will be an awesome pickup now, and will put in a lot of work in fights by giving them up to 20% lifesteal based on their missing health, which is fantastic for those key all-in brawls. Unfortunately, Warlord's Bloodlust won't be a great pickup on AD carries anymore since it doesn't give attack speed anymore, and AD carries aren't exactly the type of champion who are tanky enough to benefit from something that scales off of their missing health. Whereas the top lane brawlers are the perfect type of champion to be tanky enough to make use of the mastery and aggressive enough for it to be powerful compared to the other keystones. As well, due to the nerfs to Fiora, Gangplank, and to some extent Tahm Kench, you will also have an easier time in lane versus those champions, who were quite often major counters to those top lane brawlers. Another group of champions who received a hidden buff are aggressive supports. There's a new mastery being added in this patch called Expose Weakness that will be in the first tier of the Ferocity tree, and it makes it so that when you damage an enemy champion, your allies will also deal 3% increased damage to them. This mastery is super powerful for supports trying to play aggressive in the laning phase, both poke and all-in supports like Brand, Sonam, Leona, and honestly even champions like Thresh and Janna. It really just depends on whether or not you as a duo lane intend on playing aggressive. And if you are, it's a great option that will give you a lot more trading power. As a result, those AD carries especially and supports who are not lane dominant will be at somewhat of a disadvantage, since they won't be able to make use of this new mastery. So we can expect the bottom lane matchups to maybe start to shift a small amount towards more aggressive lanes, potentially. It really just depends on how powerful this mastery will end up being overall. The next group of champions who received an indirect buff is anyone who can build MURAMANA as a viable item. Manamune as a part of the build path to MURAMANA was buffed on this patch by making the passive stack up a little faster, and as well the changes to MURAMANA's toggle make the item a lot easier to use and more reliable, and thus a little bit stronger too. MURAMANA was an item that used to be kind of counterintuitive to toggle on or off, and the new changes make it so that you really just never have to worry about that at all, and overall just make the item so much easier to use, not to mention a little bit faster to pick up too, so the champions that could benefit from it get a little bit of a step up. As well, tank and warrior based junglers are getting a nice boost on this patch. This one's happening for two different reasons. First off, we have the nerfs to Xin Zhao and Udyr, who are very strong counters versus those types of junglers, since their 1v1 potential versus them was a lot stronger, and they were generally just bad matchups for tank and warrior junglers. As well, the nerf to Runic Echoes means that the champions in the jungle who aren't building that item get a little bit of a step up. I guess that nerf kind of affects Devourer junglers too a tiny bit, but it's definitely not as much as the warrior and especially the tank junglers, at least in my eyes, since those were some of the worst matchups for those types of champions. And our last group of champions that received an indirect buff is going to be champions like Diana middle, Cho'Gath middle, and other similar types of mid lane champions who counter KATARINA. The buff to KATARINA on this patch is pretty big and gives a lot of power to her early laning phase, which previously was one of her biggest weaknesses to take advantage of. Diana and Cho'Gath are great counters to KATARINA in the mid lane, as are quite a few other champions, and with this buff, KATARINA is very likely to get played a lot more now, meaning that those champions can get a good matchup in lane a lot more often. Next up, let's take a look at some of the more significant indirect nerfs, starting with the champions who heavily rely on crowd control to land their combos. Champions like Twisted Fate, Veigar, maybe someone like Ryze I guess. Anyone who relies on crowd control in their kit gets a little bit of a hit because Mercury Treads have received a pretty solid buff on this patch, and that item is a great counter to those types of champions, even more so now that it has higher tenacity. Merc Treads often shuts down the full ability combo of those champions, or at least makes it a lot more difficult to land, and with the buff it's a lot more enticing to buy, and you're going to see it purchased a lot more. As well, champions who build Ravenous Hydra as their first item in lane take a little bit of a hit, since the swapping between Ravenous and Titanic Hydra for 0 gold on this patch has been removed. Previously, those champions would often build the build path of Titanic Hydra in the early game, since it was a lot better for the early laning phase, and then after the item is finished, swap immediately to Ravenous Hydra, which you will no longer be able to do, and will be forced to build the inferior build path of Ravenous Hydra for the laning phase if you want to pick up that item. Alright, now that we've gone over some of the indirect buffs and nerfs on this patch, let's take a look at what you can expect will go down in patch 6.4. First off, the Jhin buff is probably the biggest buff of the entire patch, and with significant changes to a total of 7 AD carry champions in patch 6.4, you can expect the bot lane meta to shift around quite a bit. So maybe try out Jhin or some of the other buffed AD carries if you hadn't already. Since some AD carries were nerfed and some were buffed though, I considered it a power neutral change overall for the untouched AD carries, but there is still a lot of potential for one of the AD carries that wasn't touched at all on this patch to find a newfound power in the meta. And with the support mastery changes, it's possible we'll see a reasonable shift in the bot lane meta for the laning phase as a whole. As well, the KATARINA buff was a significant boost to her laning phase and really should not be underestimated. Consider playing her, banning her, or maybe playing counters to her now, as we're likely going to see a lot more KATARINA being played in games once people realize that she's a lot stronger now. And as well with the boots change, consider going Mercury Treads on your tanks and bruisers instead of Boots of Swiftness now, if the enemy team has enough champions that make Mercury Treads worth it, since the power shift in those 2 boots is quite significant. Mercury Treads is a great counter item to a lot of champions, and even more so now due to the buffs. And that's just about it. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, and if you didn't hit the dislike, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.